Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. So, you wanted to know more about the flu, huh? Well, we did too. We just finished this fascinating deep dive into a podcast called The Flu Files.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, there is some seriously interesting stuff in there. I mean, we all know about the flu, right? The sniffles, the chills.
Thanks.
Yeah, but there's a whole world of information behind this common illness that we don't even think about. And today we're going to unpack all of that.
That's right. We're going way beyond just the symptoms here. We're going to look at how the flu spreads, how to tell if it's a cold or the flu, and we'll even touch on the historical impact of the flu.
So shall we get started?
Let's dive in.
All right, so first things first, what actually is the flu?
Right. Well, the flu is caused by this virus, the influenza virus. And what's fascinating is that it specifically attacks your respiratory system.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so we're talking your nose, your throat, and sometimes even the lungs. And that explains why those symptoms can be so brutal.
Yeah, it's not just a head cold, that's for sure. You feel it everywhere.
Exactly. You get the chills, the fever, those muscle aches.
The fatigue.
Yeah, it just knocks you out. And, the podcast actually talked about how easily this virus spreads, which I think is something that we don't always think about.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I knew it was contagious, but I was surprised to hear that just talking can spread it. Like literally just having a conversation with someone can send those little virus droplets flying through the air.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? It's like you just never know who might be carrying the virus, even if they don't look sick yet. And that's why prevention is so important.
Absolutely. So what did the podcast say about how to prevent getting the flu?
Well, they emphasized hand washing a lot.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
It might seem like a simple thing, but it really does make a difference.
I guess it washes the germs away or something.
Well, it's more than just washing away germs. You see, soap molecules actually disrupt the virus's outer shell, so it literally breaks the virus apart.
Wow, I had no idea. I always thought it was just about getting the germs off your hands.
Right, it's like a microscopic power wash for your hands.
That's pretty cool.
And of course, they also mentioned avoiding close contact with people who are sick, which, that's kind of common sense, but sometimes it's hard to avoid, especially if you're around kids or in crowded places.
Yeah, true. But of course, there's always the flu shot, right?
Absolutely. They emphasize that the annual flu shot is still the best way to protect yourself from getting the flu.
Right. But you know what always gets me? Figuring out if I actually have the flu or if it's just a cold. Sometimes it's so hard to tell.
Yeah, I get that.
Like, are there any surefire ways to know the difference?
Well, the podcast actually had some good tips for this. They said a good rule of thumb is to think about how quickly the illness hits you.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So with the flu, it's usually like, bam. You're going about your day feeling fine, and then suddenly, wham, you get hit with fever, chills, muscle aches, the whole 9 yards. It comes on really fast and hits you hard.
Okay. Yeah, I've definitely had that experience before, where 1 minute you're fine and the next minute you're like dying.
Exactly. And then a cold, on the other hand, is more like a slow burn. The symptoms come on gradually over a few days. You might start with a sore throat or a runny nose, and then it kind of builds from there. But it's usually much milder than the flu.
Okay, so sudden onset and intense symptoms probably mean the flu, and a gradual milder onset is more likely a cold. Got it.
Exactly.
That's super helpful.
And knowing the difference can be important because it can help you get the right treatment faster.
Speaking of treatment, they mentioned something about antiviral medications in the podcast. What are those?
Yeah, so antivirals are basically medications that can help fight the flu virus. They work by interfering with the virus's ability to replicate or spread inside your body.
Oh, so they basically stop the virus in its tracks.
Pretty much. And the key here is that they're most effective when taken early on in the course of the illness.
Oh, so like as soon as you start feeling those telltale flu symptoms.
Exactly. If you wait too long, they might not be as helpful.
Got it. So early intervention is key.
Absolutely.
Now, one thing that really stuck with me from the podcast was the discussion about the 1918 flu pandemic. It's kind of a scary thought.
Yeah, it's definitely a reminder of how devastating influenza can be.
I mean, to think that a virus could wipe out so many people is just wild.
It's pretty sobering, isn't it? But it also shows how far we've come with medical advancements and vaccines since then.
Yeah, that's true. It makes you appreciate modern medicine a lot more.
Definitely. But it's also a reminder that we can't afford to be complacent. I mean, the flu virus is constantly evolving, which is why they have to develop new vaccines every year.
Oh, right. I actually wanted to ask about that. The podcast didn't really go into detail about how they actually create those new vaccines. It seems like that would be a really complex process.
Oh, yeah, it's super complex. Basically, researchers all over the world are constantly tracking the different flu strains that are circulating, and then they have to kind of predict which strains are going to be the most dominant in the upcoming flu season.
Wow, so it's like they're trying to predict the future of the flu.
Exactly. It's a bit like forecasting the weather, but for viruses. And then once they've identified the most likely culprits, they have to develop and test the vaccine to make sure it's safe and effective.
Man, that's some serious science right there.
It really is, but it's also a testament to human ingenuity and our ability to fight back against these microscopic invaders.
All right, so after all this talk about viruses and vaccines, I'm curious, what's the big takeaway for our listeners today?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that knowledge is power when it comes to the flu. The more you understand about how it works, how it spreads, and how to protect yourself, the better equipped you'll be to stay healthy.
Absolutely. And remember, even though we covered a lot of ground today, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole world of fascinating information out there about influenza. We didn't even touch on things like the different types of flu vaccines or the latest research on universal flu vaccines.
Right, there's always more to learn.
So if you're feeling inspired to dive deeper, there's a whole internet out there waiting for you.
And remember, stay curious and stay healthy.
Until next time.